Stephen Port, born the 22nd of February 1975, is a British convicted serial rapist and serial killer. He is responsible for murdering at least 4 men and for committing multiple rapes. Port received a life sentence with a whole life order on the 25th of November 2016, meaning he will not become eligible for parole and is unlikely to ever be released from prison. Early life. Port was born in Southend-on-Sea. When he was a year old, he moved to Dagenham in East London, where he grew up and where his parents still live. He was described as being a loner and was often bullied at school. His neighbor described him as having a peculiar, childlike personality, exhibiting odd behavior as a grown man, such as playing with children's toys. He came out as gay in his mid-20s. He lived alone in a flat in Barking, London, and worked as a chef at a stagecoach bus depot in West Ham. Victims. Port met his victims via online gay social networks and apps and constructed biographies in which he made false claims about his background, including that he had graduated from Oxford University and served in the Royal Navy. He used gamma-hydroxybutyric acid, GHB, a date rape drug, adding it to drinks given to his victims, raped them, and murdered 4 of them in his flat in Barking. The prosecution said, post-mortem examinations on the 4 young men who died revealed that each had died from a drug overdose featuring high levels of GHB, but Port surreptitiously used other drugs on his victims: amyl nitrite, poppers, Viagra, mephedrone, and methamphetamine, crystal meth. His first murder victim, Anthony Walgate, 23, a fashion student originally from Hull, who on occasion worked as an escort, was contacted by Port on the 17th of June 2014 pretending to be a client and offered £800 for his services. They later met at Barking Station. On the 19th of June 2014, Walgate was pronounced dead shortly before 8 am after Port himself anonymously called the emergency services reporting that a young boy was collapsed or had had a seizure or was drunk on the street outside his flat. Evidence linking Port to Walgate's death was missed at this time. Port was convicted of perverting the course of justice in March 2015 because his account of the death to the police varied. He was imprisoned for 8 months, but released the following June and electronically tagged. Between August 2014 and September 2015, Port murdered at least 3 more men. Gabriel Koveri, 22, who had moved to London from Slovakia and had briefly lived with Port. Daniel Whitworth, 21, from Gravesend in Kent, who worked as a chef. And Jack Taylor, 25, who lived with his parents in Dagenham, and worked as a forklift truck driver. The bodies of the last 3 of the 4 murder victims were found in the graveyard of the Church of St. Margaret of Antioch in Barking, 2 of which were found by the same woman on separate occasions walking her dog. Port had planted a fake suicide note alongside the body of Whitworth that suggested he was responsible for the death of one of the other victims, Koveri, and that he had killed himself out of guilt. Inquests. The original inquests into the deaths returned open verdicts. Nadia Persaud, the coroner, however, said she had some concerns surrounding Whitworth's death which have not been answered by the police investigation. Her statement continued, "Most concerning are the findings by the pathologist of manual handling prior to his death," and noted that the bed sheet that he was found wrapped in was not forensically analyzed, and the bottle of GBL which was found near him was also not tested for fingerprints or DNA. A detective was asked why the bed sheet had not been tested. Conviction and life sentence. On the 23rd of November 2016, Port was convicted of the assaults by penetration, rapes and murders of Anthony Walgate, 23, Gabriel Koveri, 22, Daniel Whitworth, 21, and Jack Taylor, 25, as well as the rapes of 3 other men he drugged, and 10 counts of administering a substance with intent, and 4 sexual assaults. He was found guilty on all counts. In total, 11 men were known victims of Port's crimes. Commenting on the case, Malcolm McAfee, Deputy Chief Crown Prosecutor for CPS London, said over a period of 3 years the defendant committed a series of murders and serious sexual offences against young men. Port manipulated and controlled these men through the chilling and calculated use of the drug GHB, which he administered without their permission. This was a technically challenging case, complicated by a significant amount of evidence taken from the numerous social media sites Port used. At the Old Bailey on the 25th of November 2016, Mr. Justice Openshaw sentenced Port to life imprisonment with a whole life order. Questions about the police investigation. The bodies of the 4 men were found in the vicinity of Port's flat in just over a year from late summer 2014, Wildgate, the first outside his front door and the other 3 in a nearby graveyard. The Metropolitan Police, however, neglected to link the deaths. The first 3 victims were initially thought not to have died in suspicious circumstances. And despite the Pink News website and the Force's LGBT independent advisory group correctly believing there was a serial murderer at large, the police had told them the crimes were not linked. A BBC One documentary broadcast in March 2017 suggested a catalogue of police failings in the Met's response to the deaths. Crucial witnesses were not questioned. For example, Port's neighbor who had witnessed Port in a dazed state, with a large container full of white powder and bottles of clear liquid, when he made an unexpected visit to his home, and also reported receiving suspicious text messages from Port regarding Kovari's previous roommate, John Pape, searched on the internet for other unexplained deaths in the Barking area, and was astonished at the similarities in the case of Anthony Walgate, especially the locations in which the bodies were found. However, Barking and Dagenham police did not link the 2 cases. Upon learning of Whitworth's death, he called the detective at Barking and Dagenham police and demanded to know whether they thought the now 3 cases were linked or could be murder. As he was concerned for his own personal safety, he was assured that they were not linked and not murder. He also offered to be interviewed since he felt he might have relevant information regarding Kovari's last movements, but no one contacted him in response, even after he had organizations such as Pink News contact them on his behalf. The woman who found Kovari's body and found Whitworth's body 2 weeks later in the same location and almost exactly the same position, also reported thinking that Barking and Dagenham police had no idea what they were doing not to connect the 2 cases. Whitworth's stepmother says that when police informed her of his death, they led her to believe he had overdosed on drugs, despite no investigation having taken place, and discounted the bruising under his arms, which a coroner later stated meant that third-party involvement could not be ruled out. They took the supposed suicide note left with his body at face value, sending a small fragment to her and Whitworth's father, asking them to verify whether it was his handwriting. Although they said they were unsure, it was established at trial that Barking and Dagenham police had recorded this as confirmation it was Whitworth's handwriting, and that the police had not submitted the note for expert analysis. When the couple were later shown the complete document, Whitworth's father immediately commented that he saw nothing to indicate it had been written by his son. The couple had also asked whether the police had investigated who was meant by the guy I was with last night, and that the response was that it would never be possible to find out all the answers. Asking about challenging the open verdict or continuing the investigation, his stepmother encountered what she described as an attitude of, "It is what it is, deal with it." Similarly, Taylor's sister reported the police simply telling the family, "Jack's dead," and accepting the syringe in his pocket, white powder in his wallet and needle marks on his arm as indicating that he had sat down by himself and overdosed on drugs, although her brother was very anti-drugs. She and another sister contacted Barking and Dagenham police 11 days after his death for an update on their investigation and were astonished to discover none was taking place. They then researched for themselves and came across the 3 previous cases, but the police responded by denying there was any connection. Eventually, 2 weeks after his death, the police agreed to take the 2 sisters to where Taylor's body had been found. and at Barking Station, told them that CCTV footage of Taylor and another man had been found. The sisters were surprised not to have been notified, and more surprised to be told the police were not attempting to identify the other man. One described the attitude of the police as shocking. In response to their questioning the credibility of the police account of what the footage showed, a sergeant later contacted them to say that upon review, the footage did not show Taylor entering the churchyard alone. They then requested that images of the other man be made public in order to identify him. The police were reluctant, saying that they did not normally release CCTV images, but eventually gave in, and 2 days later Port was identified from the images and arrested. Following Port's conviction, the Independent Police Complaints Commission opened an investigation into whether 17 police officers should face disciplinary action. As of November 2017, this was expected to be completed in spring 2018, but not made public until after a verdict in a new joint inquest on all 4 deaths. The inquests on Coveri and Whitworth were later quashed. The families have also opened a civil claim against the Metropolitan Police. The Metropolitan Police also reported in 2016 that they were re-examining 58 unexplained deaths involving date rape drugs, although a spokeswoman said there was nothing to suggest that Port was linked to any of them. Sentencing of Port's GHB dealer in 2019. Gerald Matovu, who is known to have supplied Port with the GHB used in the killings, was arrested and sentenced to 31 years in prison for the murder of actor and businessman Eric Mitchells. Using similar methods to Port, Matovu had targeted Mitchells on Grindr and given him a fatal dose of GHB. In popular culture in 2017, the BBC aired the documentary How Police Missed the Grindr Killer, which examined the botched investigation into Port's murders. In 2019, it was announced the BBC would produce a drama thriller titled The Barking Murders, written by Neil McKay, which will be based on the investigation led by the families of Port's victims. Stephen Merchant will portray Port, while Sheridan Smith and Jamie Wingstone will feature in supporting roles. It was later announced that the drama would be retitled 4 Lives. See also List of prisoners with whole life tariffs, List of serial rapists. References